Hi everybody. Today we're going to talk about a couple kits that I bring with me. First aid kit, and I think we all know what that means, and what I call a hygiene kit. Some people call it a toiletry kit. I call it a hygiene kit. Kind of reminds me more of why I've got it with me. So let's start with the first aid kit. The first aid kit is one of those things that you bring with you, but you hope you don't need. It's kind of like homeowners insurance. You year after year you send money to the insurance company and you really hope that it's a waste. You hope you never have to make a claim on it. Because if you're making a claim, something bad has happened and you'd just be better off without that bad thing happening and throwing the money away, which is kind of what we want to have happen with insurance. First aid kit is analogous in that you carry it with you. My first aid kit is 12 ounces, 3/4 of a pound. And I carry it with me thousands of miles, and I hope I never have to open it up. So there are trade-offs that you have to decide. Given that you don't want to use it, you still have to have important things in it. So we have to do a series of trade-off analysis to figure out what to bring with us. And the question comes up, can you prepare for everything? So what I'd like to do now is give you a couple stories of hikers' experiences. Our first hiker I ran into in 2019. I had been doing a loop training hike in the Green Mountains. I went from Bennington up to the Goddard shelter, pitched my tent near the shelter on the side of Glastonbury Mountain, and then I took the West Ridge Trail back and looped around to the trailhead. And I ran into this gentleman and his girlfriend or wife, I don't remember which, and I honestly don't remember his name, but I do remember his story. He had set up this Trail Angel tent with barbecue under it to help out the hikers. And the reason he was doing this, rather than being out hiking himself, is because he had been out hiking out on the Pacific Crest Trail, and he broke one of the major bones in his leg. I don't remember if it's a femur or tibia. I'm not really big into skeletal muscles, skeletal bones. He a fetlock. I don't know. And he had to hike 40 miles to get help. And you think about it. Could he have carried anything in his first aid kit to help him with that? I really don't think so. I mean, there's like the old bumper stickers used to say, things occur. And this is one of those things where you just have to be mentally prepared to deal with it. But there's really not a lot. He couldn't bring a cast or a crutch or anything with him in his first aid kit, so he just had to deal with it on the trail. So let's look at my story. That within a month and a half of that, I was up on the Presidential Range, and I was out in the sun for a good 11 hours, hiking from the Mitzpah hut to the Madison hut. And my legs hadn't seen the light of day in years, and I forgot to put sunblock on them. Now, there's a graphic image about to come up. I'm going to show you the second-degree burns as the blisters started to form on my leg. They just got worse and worse and worse with time. And I was with another hiker, Crusher, by the time these started to form really bad, and it was good to have another person to kind of give a second opinion. We were about to get out of the hut system in the White Mountains and actually start camping out in the wild. And he said, there's too much of a chance of infection here. So the question was, what might I have brought in a first aid kit that could help me with this? And the answer is, maybe a little aloe or something, but they actually didn't hurt. My main problem was the potential for infection, and they just got so big that there's no way I could hike. So really, I should have prevented this in the first place. It was my mistake not to put sunblock on them, not to realize that I was going to be above tree line for 11 hours that day and out in the sun, beautiful hiking weather. So first aid kit contents might not have helped me there either. So what is first aid really good for? Is it good for major trauma? Or is the reason we have a first aid kit to stop the minor things from becoming major? And now I'm not a medical expert. I'm not really trained in first aid beyond what I learned in Boy Scouts 50 years ago. Thinking about it, I probably should take at least an online course in basic first aid, or find a Red Cross course or something. And maybe all hikers should do that. I haven't done that yet, but I'll look into it. But my philosophy is the second. It's to stop the minor from becoming major. So here's my kit. Right here. It's easily identifiable container. It's actually an old Gatorade powder mix container. I have its contents actually listed under the lid. See it there. And before each hike, I actually go through that checklist that's under the lid, and of course I have it on file somewhere in case I have to reprint it. And I make sure everything's up to date. I have to ensure that whatever over-the-counter medications I have are up to date. Basically, if they've been in there for a year, I'm going to throw out all the ibuprofen and Tylenol, and I'm just going to, replace it with new. And you'll notice that I have duct tape wrapped around it. And the reason for that is my actual hygiene kit, which I'll get to later, is in the same kind of container, but it doesn't have the duct tape. So I can quickly tell which is the first aid kit and which is the hygiene kit. Okay, so here are the contents. I'm going to go over them quickly. This is actually the same list that I have under the lid of this first aid kit. Got moleskin, that's for treating blisters. I got a small pair of scissors. I learned out in the Grand Canyon when I was out hiking with Craig that cutting moleskin with a jackknife just doesn't work. So I have this little pair of scissors. As a matter of fact, that might be something worth pulling out and showing you. They're just small scissors, and they're very good for cutting moleskin. Nail clippers. If you're on a longer trip, you want to be able to trim your nails so they don't start digging into your toes. I'm thinking toes mostly. Triple antibiotic for minor cuts and bruises. Glide sticks to help avoid chafing. I've got a needle in there just in case I have to lance something. And of course, Band-Aids. I mean, everybody has Band-Aids in their first aid kit. Some afterbite. I learned to bring that. It's a insect bite treatment. Darlene and I were actually at the Mammoth Cave National Park in Kentucky, and while I was taking the cave tour, Darlene was stung by a yellow jacket hornet and had to go get first aid because she's very sensitive to such stings, and they gave her some afterbite, and that was very helpful. Of course, you have gauze pads. We'll have some tape. I have a medicine container. There's where I put the ibuprofen, which a lot of hikers call vitamin I, and Tylenol, and in my case, Dramamine. If I'm taking a bus or a train to where I'm going to want to take some Dramamine because I'm susceptible to motion sickness. And those things all go in what is actually an old film, one of those black film containers with the gray lid, and that's where I keep all the medicines. I have lens cloth, and I have to find some more earplugs. That's going to be if you're ever, earplugs are good if you're going to be in a shelter and there's other people in it because a lot of people snore. I bring Tums. I used to have a problem with heartburn. Actually, since I lost weight, changed my dietary lifestyle, I haven't had that problem for quite some time, but just in case, bring some Tums. Nothing worse than having heartburn on the trail and not being able to do anything about it. And a pair of tweezers, and of course tweezers are good for removing ticks. So that really is one of those things that falls under the category of stopping a minor problem from becoming a major problem. You identify the tick, you get it off you before it can infect you with Lyme disease or some other tick-borne disease. So now the question comes up about access to it. When I was talking about my backpack, I had actually kind of thought about mentioning this, and I ended up not mentioning it. It's like, why is my first aid kit not in that B category? I had A, B, C, and D categories, and the B category was stuff that I put in the mesh pocket in the back of the front of the backpack. I don't know. I guess it's the front of the backpack. The mesh pocket there, which are things that I will need immediate but not constant access to. And I've only actually had to break into my first aid kit once in 16 years, and that was actually my most recent trip, not the one, well, nearly the most recent trip as of this filming, not the one up Mount Monadnock, but when I was doing a 65-mile section hike in the southern trail part of Maine, where I was going from Stratton back to Andover. I took a really nasty fall. I gashed open my elbow. There was blood everywhere. And that was the first time that I had to get into the first aid kit to meet an immediate need. Now, it wasn't bleeding so bad that I actually had to do it right then and there. I was able to hike a mile or so to get to an open area, a nice parking lot. I really needed to wash that cut out. So I washed it out. I put some triple antibiotic on it and bandaged it. So it is a trade-off of where to carry it, but I've decided it just goes into the D part of my pack, if you remember that video, where it's just in amongst my stuff. And the one time in however long I need it, I'll go through the trouble of taking the pack off and getting into it. I know exactly where it is in there. It's not too deep into there, but I do have to take off the pack, open it up, and get into the inner liner and pull this out. So I assess the probability or frequency of the need versus the severity. I just don't need constant access to it or immediate access to it. You might feel differently, and I might feel differently when I need it, but that's really the trade-off I've had to do. So let's move on to the hygiene kit. Hygiene kit looks very much like my first aid kit. It's a little bit heavier. And with hygiene on the trail, we just have to admit, you're not going to get at-home cleanliness while you're out on the trail. It's just a fact of life. You've got to do your best. Find ways to improve your on-trail hygiene, but just be aware that showers and laundry opportunities are relatively rare. I actually, when I was on my long section hike, I actually got a shower an average of every 4 days. I got 10 showers in 41 days. But that's highly unusual. That's something maybe you can do in Virginia, not something you're likely to be able to manage in Maine. So you have to have alternate ways of keeping clean. And don't ignore hygiene as a losing battle. Just do the best that you can. Okay, so in my Gatorade container, I have a few interesting things. I have this stuff called, I don't know, Lume or Lume. It's a deodorant that Katrina actually got for me and sent to me when I was on the trail. I actually picked it up in Harper's Ferry, West Virginia. I've got to learn how to use it a little better. It's supposedly, she used it successfully when they had a big power outage in Texas and they couldn't wash their clothes for a while. You basically, when you're clean, you start out clean after a shower or whatever, you put a little bit of this stuff in certain key parts of your body, and every day just keep doing that. I wasn't quite using it right, and it's very hard to tell if it's working because it's kind of hard to smell yourself, but I'm going to keep trying it, and hopefully that'll at least cut down on the hiker smell that we all fall victim to. The next thing I have in there is this little container of hand sanitizer. Germex or Perel. I use Germex because that just happens to be what I have. And I keep this in here. It actually goes a long way. A little bit of hand sanitizer, it's actually good for your feet too. I was once when I was actually hiking in camping out in a hammock. I was in a hammock and something smelled terrible, and I realized it was my feet. A little bit of hand sanitizer on it, cleaned it up really nice. I have another bottle exactly the same size, and I actually put it in the roll of my toilet paper. And toilet paper, as you remember, is one of those things I keep in the mesh in a waterproof baggie in the mesh pocket on my backpack. And by having one of these with it, well, you can put two and two together and figure out that, wow, I always have hand sanitizer whenever I need to use the toilet paper, much more sanitary. So that's what I do there. Another thing I have is this Camp Suds biodegradable soap. It's very highly concentrated, and even though it's biodegradable, when you use it away from streams. But that's also a very good item for keeping clean. I actually got a big bottle of it because, you know, this is one of those things that if you buy it in bulk, it's much cheaper. So I have a much bigger bottle, and I keep on just refilling the smaller bottle to keep the hygiene kit full up. And of course, I have a portable toothbrush, which basically these are real cheap. I bring it on one trip, throw it out when I'm done. But you know, you've got to brush your teeth. Don't let your dental hygiene lapse. You definitely need to. And of course, we've got floss. If you can hear some banging in the background, I apologize for that. That's actually the sprinkler system. We've got a problem with it that I got to fix. I bring nail clippers. Again, that's to, I think I mentioned that as one of the things in the first aid kit. It actually, I moved it over to the hygiene kit, so I'm going to have to take it off the first aid kit list. Some lip balm, just when you're, you know, above tree line and in the sun a lot, stop and chop lip. And then another little trick. You see these all over the place. They come in the prepackaged meals. They come in a lot of items you get. It's an oxygen absorber. You know, so once they say do not eat on it, because like people are stupid and they'll, you know, eat anything. And I just throw that in there. It just helps keep things drier. You know, it helps keep things dry. Out on the trail, it's very hard. You know, the moisture's going to get in. So that helps absorb it. So that's my hygiene kit. There's a couple other related items that are kind of related to hygiene and first aid that I bring with me, and actually related to first aid. And these are things that I do put in the mesh pocket in my backpack because, well, I'll tell you in a moment. First of all, there's the SPF 100, this Sports Ultra Banana Boat brand is what I happen to pick up at Walmart. And the reason I keep it in the mesh pocket is because I know myself a little too well. And if I have to go digging through my knapsack every time I come to it looks like I'm going to be above tree line for a little while, or I'm going to be like in southern Pennsylvania out in pasture land and going over farmlands out in the sun, I'm going to convince myself it's not going to be that bad. But if this is easily accessible and all I have to do is take the pack off, reach into the mesh pocket, I'm going to use the sunblock when I need it. It's certainly something that if you're going to hike in like the Grand Canyon or a place like that, you definitely need it. I compare hiking in the sunlight in the Grand Canyon to, if you've ever seen the movie Chronicles of Riddick, the blonde hair speaker wanders out into the sun and bursts into flames. And sometimes I feel that's what it's like to be in the American Southwest hiking. Another thing, of course, I have to bring is a insect repellent. This particular insect repellent, Picaridin, I don't know how to pronounce it. It was actually recommended to me by the professor, guy I met in Virginia. And here's a tip. When somebody recommends something like that, you want to do your research, of course, and see if it's right for you. But take a picture of it with your camera so you don't forget what it was. And that's how I remembered what this was. He actually held it out for me, and I took the picture of it. That's another thing that I keep in my mesh because I want quick access to that when the bugs start getting bad, and or it's first thing in the morning and I just want to put it on in the morning. And I happen to use the lotion forms of these things because I found that spray on just doesn't work for me. I just, I'm bending over trying to get it on my legs. I'm trying to spray. You turn it upside down, doesn't work, sprays off in the wrong direction. So that's a couple of the things that I bring with me. And now I'm considering, as you recall when I talked about water, the kitchen sink. The kitchen sink was this 10-liter bag that was just used in general for use of water. And I think if I had that with me when I was on my long section hike, I probably could have been a lot cleaner. Just filling it up, you might want to filter the water or chemically treat it or something, just so that you're not rubbing, contaminated water on your body. But I bet I could do sponge baths sort of thing a lot more effectively if I had brought the kitchen sink with me. So I think in the future I'm actually going to bring a kitchen sink with me just for personal hygiene. And I can imagine you could probably wash a shirt in it or something like that. The problem is, of course, drying things afterwards, but it's just a consideration. I'll do it. I'll let everybody know how it turned out sometime in the future. So that's the first aid kit and the hygiene kit.